what dependent arising describes is the interwoven nature of existence, that nothing is alone, nothing stands independently, nothing is separate, everything is affecting everything else. We are being affected by so many conditions in every moment, and in turn, we are affecting everything around us. Dependent arising is a dynamic process occurring moment to moment in our lives, in our days, in our consciousness, countless times. We see moments of despair at seeing the rain outside. We see the moments of elation when the sun comes out. We see the irritation arising when the train is late. And we see the joyfulness of meeting a good friend. These are all moments of world creation, shaping how we act, how we react, how we understand, how we perceive. The basic principle of dependent arising is that when there is this, that is. When this is not, neither is that. With the cessation of this, that ceases. For a book to be written, it requires a certain number of conditions coming together, an idea, a pen, a paper, a writer, an author. If one of those conditions is taken out of the equation, it is not that nothing happens. Something else happens. For rain to occur requires the meeting of a certain weather system of clouds, of precipitation, of temperature. You take one of those conditions out, it's not as if nothing happens. Something else arises. Dependent arising is a process that not only occurs again and again in our individual consciousness, there is also a dimension of dependent arising that can be collective, where actually we repeat cycles collectively as communities, as families, as societies. Understanding dependent arising can have a profound effect not only on our individual consciousness, our way of being, the degree of freedom or the degree of suffering that we experience. Understanding dependent arising can also have a profound impact on social and community levels. When we think about how we can spin cycles of hatred or mistrust together, how we can collectively generate perceptions of goodwill. I think the most important teaching of dependent arising, of Paticca Samuppada, is understanding this possibility of change, that we can step out of repetitive cycles in any moment if there's sufficient awareness, sufficient understanding present. So the teaching of dependent arising, yes, it is teaching us how struggle and distress and senses of being bound and imprisoned come into being. But the keys to understanding freedom of heart, the keys to understanding peace and well-being also lie within this same map, these same 12 links that we're invited to understand. This is a journey. It's a process. It requires stillness. It requires commitment. It requires curiosity and interest. But it is a journey of awakening. For me, understanding the depth and profundity of dependent arising is almost the work of a lifetime. Every time I teach this, every time I explore this for myself, I learn something new. I learn something afresh. For me, understanding dependent arising is really to understand how I live and why I live the way that I do, why I see the way that I do, why I hold the values that I hold. This is what our world hinges upon, rests upon, our understanding or our lack of understanding of dependent arising.
For me, the idea of dependent arising is important because it constantly reminds us of the challenge of living in a world that is constantly in a process of flux and change, that's constantly moving into an unknown, both in terms of what I perceive through the senses, in terms also of what I sense within the processes of my own thoughts and feelings and emotions. By focusing human experience through the lens of dependent arising, we're somehow setting a framework for how we might live better in the world, in our relations with other people, in our relations with ourselves. It opens us to embracing fully the contingent, the conditional nature of life itself. And I find that although this may not be an idea that I'm constantly thinking about or repeating to myself, over the years, in having worked within this frame, I feel that that sensibility, a sensibility to contingency, to change, to conditionality, has begun very much to somehow become internalized, so that it's just more and more describes my basic sense of what it means to be alive. The centrality of dependent arising is found in a statement that we find attributed to Sariputta, one of the Buddha's chief disciples, where he says, the one who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, and the one who sees the Dharma sees dependent arising.